History is not a simple story written in stone. Sometimes it is a mystery whispered by objects that defy all logic. You are about to see 25 of these out-of-place artifacts, each one a physical challenge to everything we think we know about the past. By the end of this journey, you will possess a new perspective on human ingenuity and the profound gaps in our historical record. How could a 2,000-year-old device predict planetary movements, or an ancient map depict a continent buried under ice? These artifacts suggest our ancestors may have been far more advanced or interconnected than any textbook dares to say. What does our discomfort with these mysteries reveal about our own understanding of time? The first clue was pulled from the seafloor, encrusted and forgotten. In 1901, a group of sponge divers seeking shelter from a storm near the island of Antikythera made a startling discovery. Their search for safety led them to the wreck of an ancient Roman cargo ship, a vessel resting in deep silence for 2,000 years. Among the statues and amphorae, they recovered a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood, so unremarkable it was initially catalogued as a piece of a statue or perhaps just nautical scrap. It was set aside, a curiosity overshadowed by more obviously beautiful finds, but this humble object, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, would become one of the most profound archaeological puzzles ever unearthed. Decades later, careful cleaning and advanced imaging revealed it to be nothing less than an ancient Greek astronomical calculator. It was a compact device housed in a wooden case with a complex assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. This was not a simple calendar. Researchers found it could predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon with a sophisticated differential gear, a level of mechanical engineering not seen again until the 18th century. This device, crafted in the 2nd or 1st century before the Common Era, has been called the world's first known analog computer. Its very existence creates a glaring anomaly in our historical timeline. According to conventional understanding, such intricate mechanical knowledge simply did not exist in the Hellenistic world. The technology to create such precise gearwork and the scientific understanding to encode celestial mechanics into metal should not reappear in Europe for over 1,000 years. The Antikythera Mechanism is not an outlier, it is a direct challenge. It forces a humbling admission that an entire lineage of advanced engineering and astronomical thought flourished and then was utterly lost. We must ask, if this one device survived by pure chance at the bottom of the sea, what other marvels of ancient science were lost forever, leaving no trace in the historical record? This single artifact rewrites our perception of Greek ingenuity, suggesting a technological peak whose shadow we are only now beginning to see. That single device from the sea hints at a forgotten science of precision and gears. But what about the power to make them move? Not far from where the mechanism was crafted, in the lands of ancient Mesopotamia, another artifact suggests our ancestors may have been playing with a different kind of force entirely. In the quiet basement of a museum in Baghdad rests a collection of objects that seem utterly mundane at first glance. There is a simple clay jar about the size of a hand. Inside it, archaeologists found a copper cylinder carefully soldered with a lead-tin alloy, and within that, an iron rod. These items were excavated from a site dating to the Parthian period, a time spanning roughly 200 years before the Common Era to 200 years after. They were catalogued, stored away, and largely forgotten until a curator made a startling observation. The assembly, if filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or grape juice, forms a basic galvanic cell. It can produce a small but measurable electric current, around 1 volt. This discovery immediately earned it the popular name, the Baghdad Battery. The question it raises is electrifying in its own right. Was this an ancient power source? Some researchers propose it could have been used for electroplating, to deposit a thin layer of gold onto silver objects, a practice known in the region. Others suggest a more subtle application, perhaps a mild electric current used for therapeutic or ceremonial purposes, a tingle attributed to divine power. Mainstream archaeology often offers a more conservative explanation, that it was simply a sealed storage vessel for important scrolls. Yet the design is curiously specific for a storage jar, with the iron rod insulated from the copper cylinder by an asphalt stopper, a perfect setup to prevent the metals from touching and to allow for the introduction of a liquid. If this humble clay pot was indeed a battery, it represents a concept that would not be formally rediscovered until Alessandro Volta's work in the late 18th century, a gap of nearly 2,000 years. This artifact does not stand as proof of an ancient electrical grid, but rather as a profound maybe. It lives in the space between a practical tool and a ceremonial object, its true purpose forever shrouded by the silence of the past. It challenges us to ask whether the spark of discovery can be struck in different eras by different minds, only to be lost and found again across the vast stretches of time. The idea of a forgotten spark of electricity is a quiet suggestion, a maybe whispered from a clay jar. But what happens when a discovery screams its impossibility from within a stone? The story shifts from the museums of the Middle East to the sun-scorched hills of California. In 1961, a group of rock and mineral enthusiasts were searching the Coso Mountains for geodes, those humble nodules that can hide breathtaking crystal cavities within. They found one, and with the familiar crack of a geode hammer, they split it open. Inside, they did not find the expected quartz or agate. Instead, they found an object that seemed to defy the very rock that encased it. At the core was a cylinder of white ceramic, with a 2-millimeter metal shaft running through its center. This assembly was surrounded by a hexagonal casing of what appeared to be hardened clay, and the entire object was encased in a shell of fossilized shells and mineral deposits. It looked for all the world like a piece of modern machinery. An X-ray taken later only deepened the mystery, revealing internal components that bore a startling resemblance to a contemporary spark plug. The immediate and obvious question was how such an object could be found inside a geode, a formation that, by geological understanding, takes immense spans of time to develop. Initial examinations suggested the surrounding material could be 500,000 years old. This single detail launched the artifact into the realm of the spectacular, fueling theories of a pre-human advanced civilization or even visitors from beyond our world leaving behind a fragment of their technology. It became a perfect emblem for the idea of an out-of-place artifact, a manufactured item impossibly stranded in deep time. Yet, as with all such mysteries, a closer look often reveals a more grounded, if no less fascinating, narrative. Skeptics, including many geologists, pointed to a far more plausible explanation. The object, they argued, was almost certainly a champion spark plug from the early 20th century, likely from a 1920s vehicle or piece of mining equipment. The so-called geode was not a true geode at all, but a concretion, a hard mineral mass that can form relatively quickly around a foreign object, especially in mineral-rich environments. The process can cement shells and debris around a core in a matter of decades, not millennia, creating a convincing illusion of great age. The Coso Artifact thus sits at a critical crossroads in our exploration of the anomalous. It embodies the intense and necessary clash between extraordinary claims and ordinary evidence. It challenges not only our interpretation of the physical object, but our own deep-seated eagerness to believe in the revolutionary find, the one piece of evidence that will overturn everything. This artifact serves as a vital cautionary tale, reminding us that the true mystery often lies not in the object itself, but in the delicate dance between what we find, what we wish to see, and the patient, often unglamorous work of discerning the difference. It asks us to hold two competing truths in mind, the allure of the fantastic and the discipline of the plausible, as we examine the next enigma laid before us. The line between a revolutionary discovery and a simple misunderstanding can be as thin as the edge of a hammer. In 1936, on a walk near the town of London, Texas, a couple made a find that would ignite a debate spanning generations. They came across a curious piece of rock, a loose nodule that had tumbled down from an outcrop. When they cracked it open, they were stunned to see a metal object embedded within, its wooden handle partially turned to coal. It was a hammer, a simple tool, yet it was encased in what appeared to be solid Cretaceous rock, a geological formation reliably dated to well over 100 million years old. This artifact, known now as the London Hammer, presents a physical paradox. How could a manufactured object with a clear iron head and a handle made of organic material become part of a stone matrix that predates humanity by tens of millions of years? For some, the conclusion is direct and world-altering. It is seen as tangible proof that modern humans, or beings like us, walked the Earth alongside dinosaurs, a direct challenge to the entire fossil record and the evolutionary timeline. The hammer's head adds fuel to this fire, as metallurgical analysis has shown it to be made of an unusually pure form of iron, lacking the slag common in modern industrial production, which suggests a sophisticated and perhaps unfamiliar forging technique. Yet geology offers a different, more gradual story. Skeptics point to a common but easily misunderstood natural process. The hammer, they argue, is a classic example of a concretion. In certain mineral-rich environments, especially around ancient seabeds, dissolved minerals can precipitate and harden around any solid object, encasing it completely in a stone shell over a relatively short period. A hammer lost by a 19th-century miner could, within a few centuries, become the nucleus for a concretion that looks, to the untrained eye, identical to 100-million-year-old rock. The wooden handle's partial transformation to coal is also consistent with this process, as pressure and heat from the concretion formation can cause that change. So the London Hammer does not force us to choose between science and mystery, but rather between two different interpretations of evidence. It lives at the fiery crossroads where established timelines meet powerful alternative narratives. Its true power lies not in providing a definitive answer, but in framing an essential question about our past. How do we distinguish between an artifact that rewrites history and an ordinary object that nature has dressed in the costume of deep time? The hammer's silence compels us to look more carefully, not just at the object in the rock, but at the stories we are so eager to build around it. A hammer trapped in stone forces us to question the very ground beneath our feet. But what if the next mystery arrived not from the earth, but, according to its own story, from the stars? The tale of the Dropa Stones is one of the most persistent legends in the realm of archaeological anomalies, a story that lives in the hazy borderland between discovery and myth. The account begins in 1938, when a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te is said to have been exploring the remote Bayan Karaula Mountains, a rugged region straddling the border between China and Tibet. In a system of caves, he reportedly made a bizarre find. There were rows of neat graves, and within them, the skeletal remains of individuals with unusually large skulls and slender, small frames. But the real discovery was scattered nearby, hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter with a hole in the center, resembling primitive phonograph records. These were no ordinary stones. Each disc was carved with a fine, continuous spiral groove that, upon closer inspection, was said to be composed of tiny, barely visible hieroglyphic characters. The narrative takes its extraordinary leap when the inscriptions were supposedly translated years later. They told the story of the Dropa, a peaceful people who crash-landed their spacecraft in the mountains thousands of years ago. Unable to repair their vessel, they were stranded on Earth, and their story was etched into these stones for posterity. This account fits perfectly into the framework of ancient astronaut theory, suggesting direct contact with extraterrestrial visitors in humanity's distant past. Yet here is where the artifact meets its greatest challenge, a near-total absence of verifiable evidence. No major museum claims to hold these discs. No peer-reviewed studies have analyzed their material or inscriptions. The principal figures in the story are obscure, and many details have shifted and grown with each retelling. Mainstream archaeology universally dismisses the Dropa Stones as an elaborate hoax, a 20th-century fabrication that skillfully wove together then-popular science fiction themes with the allure of a remote, unexplored region. So why does this story endure with such tenacity? The power of the Dropa legend lies not in its archaeological truth, but in its cultural truth. It represents something profound about our collective imagination. This tale highlights how a single, unverified report can evolve into a full-fledged modern myth, reflecting a deep and timeless human fascination. We look at the vastness of the night sky and the gaps in our own history, and we cannot help but wonder if the two are connected. The stones, whether real or not, speak to our desire for a cosmos that is less lonely and for a past that is more wondrous. They remind us that the line between a groundbreaking historical discovery and a compelling work of fiction can sometimes be as thin as the groove on a stone disc. This legend challenges us to examine not only the artifacts we find, but the stories we are so eager to believe, and the reasons why we believe them at all. Legends of the sky speak to our deepest aspirations, but sometimes the evidence is carved in wood and laid to rest with the honored dead. Within the shadow of the step pyramid at Saqqara, in a tomb from around 200 years before the Common Era, archaeologists uncovered a small and unassuming artifact. It is a model carved from sycamore wood just over 5 inches long. At first glance, it appears to be a stylized bird, a common funerary offering meant to symbolize the soul's journey. But a closer look reveals a detail that makes aviation historians pause. This object has wings, yes, but its tail is completely wrong for a bird. Instead of a horizontal, feathered plane, it features a distinct vertical tail fin, precisely the kind of stabilizing structure found on modern aircraft. This is the Saqqara Bird, and it presents a quiet, elegant puzzle. To the trained eye of an Egyptologist, it is most logically a ritual object, perhaps a representation of a falcon, the sacred bird of the god Horus. It could be a child's toy, a simple carving meant for comfort in the afterlife. These explanations are sensible and grounded in cultural context, yet the artifact refuses to be so easily categorized. Its design is curiously specific. The wings are sleek and angled with a distinct airfoil shape that suggests an understanding of lift. That vertical tail fin, however, is the real point of contention. In nature, only a few birds, like the swift, have a slightly forked tail that might be misinterpreted, but nothing matches the clean, fin-like profile of the Saqqara carving. Driven by this curiosity, some researchers have taken the speculation a step further. Could it be a model of a glider? In the 1990s, a skilled aeronautical engineer built a scaled-up, functional replica of the artifact. When tested, he reported that with the addition of a small horizontal stabilizer, it did indeed exhibit stable gliding properties. While this test was informal and is not considered definitive scientific proof, it raises a fascinating hypothetical. It invites us to consider whether the ancient craftsman was merely stylizing a bird, or if they were unconsciously, or even intentionally, carving the principles of flight they observed in nature into a form that we now recognize as aerodynamic. The true power of the Saqqara Bird lies not in proving ancient Egyptians had aircraft, but in illuminating a timeless human process. It represents the act of observation translating into form. The ancients watched birds soar on thermal currents. They saw the way a curved wing slices through the air. This artifact may be the physical echo of that observation, a three-dimensional question about the mechanics of flight carved in wood. It embodies the dream itself, the universal longing to defy gravity that spans cultures and millennia. Whether a toy, a ritual object, or an accidental blueprint, the Saqqara Bird connects the tomb builders of the Nile to the bicycle mechanics of Kitty Hawk through a single, enduring aspiration. It challenges us to see the artifacts of the past not just as relics of belief, but as potential fragments of a long, continuous conversation with the natural world, a conversation about how things move and how we might one day join them in the sky. The dream of flight is carved in wood, but the knowledge of the world can be etched on skin. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, a map drawn on gazelle skin holds a secret that has puzzled historians for generations. Created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this artifact is a masterpiece of its age, blending the known geography of Europe, Africa, and the newly discovered Americas. But in its lower left corner lies a detail that should not exist. The map appears to show a landmass connected to the southern tip of South America, with coastlines and bays rendered in careful detail. This land bears a startling resemblance to the northern coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would remain officially unknown to the world for another 300 years. The mystery deepens with a single, chilling observation. On the Piri Reis Map, this southern land is depicted not as a frozen, glacial wasteland, but with rivers, mountains, and what look like ice-free shores. This suggests the map's sources were not drawn from the frigid reality of the 16th century, but from a time when that coastline was free of its immense ice cap. Geological evidence tells us the last time Antarctica could have been seen in such a state was thousands of years ago, long before any known civilization capable of such precise mapping. Piri Reis himself provided a clue to this enigma. In notes on the map, he wrote that he compiled it from many source charts, including what he called ancient maps from the time of Alexander. He specifically cited using a map drawn by Christopher Columbus, implying he was synthesizing both contemporary and far older geographical knowledge. This admission points to the existence of a lost cartographic tradition, a chain of knowledge passed down and refined by seafarers whose names are lost to history. Could ancient mariners have ventured so far south? Mainstream scholarship offers a cautious counterpoint. Some geographers argue the controversial landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a speculative, mythical southern continent, a common feature on maps of the era, or a distorted rendering of the coast of Patagonia, stretched and merged with rumor. Yet the precision of certain features, like the profile of South America's eastern coast, remains notably accurate for its time. This creates a fascinating tension. The Piri Reis Map stands as a powerful testament to the fragility of human knowledge. It embodies the idea that advanced understanding of our world can be achieved, preserved in libraries and charts, and then utterly lost to war, disaster, or simply the slow erosion of time. The map is not necessarily proof of ancient global exploration, but it is undeniable evidence of a puzzle. It suggests that the past may have held pockets of sophisticated science and daring voyage, whose records survive only as faint echoes in later works. It challenges the linear narrative of discovery, forcing us to wonder how much was known and forgotten long before the age we claim as the dawn of exploration. A map suggests forgotten voyages, but stones can tell a far more direct and startling story. In a private museum in the town of Ica, Peru, there exists a collection that defies simple explanation. It consists of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of andesite stones, each one carefully carved with intricate, shallow line etchings. These are the Ica Stones, and their imagery is a chaotic gallery of the impossible. They show human figures locked in battle with creatures unmistakably resembling Tyrannosaurus rex and Stegosaurus. Other stones depict complex medical scenes, including what looks like a cesarean section and even a heart transplant, with detailed renderings of internal organs. There are charts of constellations, maps of unknown lands, and images of advanced technology. According to the man who brought them to light in the 1960s, a local farmer named Basilio Ashuya, these stones were ancient artifacts he discovered in a cave. He claimed they were a library left by a vanished, advanced civilization. The academic world responded with immediate and nearly universal skepticism. Geologists noted the stones showed no signs of the patina or weathering one would expect from great age. The carvings themselves, with their sharp, uneroded edges, appeared fresh. Under pressure, Ashuya eventually admitted he had carved the stones himself, using a dental drill and then aging them with chicken droppings. Case closed, it seemed, an elaborate and profitable hoax. Yet, the mystery of the Ica Stones refuses to dissolve so neatly. The sheer scale of the collection is its own kind of puzzle. To produce tens of thousands of intricately detailed carvings, each consistent in style and theme, would represent a lifetime of solitary labor, an act of forgery so monumental it becomes a strange kind of art project. Why would anyone dedicate decades to such an endeavor? Furthermore, some researchers and visitors have reported stones appearing in local collections or even in geological strata before Ashuya's story became public, suggesting the possibility of a wider phenomenon he merely exploited. Whether ancient or modern, the stones perform a powerful cultural function. They are a deliberate, visual assault on the official timeline. They do not whisper their challenge, they shout it in etched stone. They force a confrontation not with evidence but with narrative. Why does the image of a human riding a dinosaur hold such enduring power? It speaks to a deep-seated human desire to connect our story directly to the most dramatic epochs of Earth's history, to imagine a past where humanity was not a late arrival but a contemporary of giants. The Ica Stones, real or forged, are ultimately a mirror. They reflect our own fascination with the gaps in the fossil record, our skepticism of institutional stories, and our longing for a history that is more wondrous and more directly knowable than fragments of bone and pottery can provide. They challenge us to ask where the line lies between a hoax meant to deceive and a myth meant to inspire, and why sometimes the difference matters less than the story we are so compelled to tell. A book exists that refuses to be read. In the hushed reading room of the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, there is a volume that has stared down the world's greatest cryptographers, linguists, and historians for over a century. It is the Voynich Manuscript, a 240-page codex written entirely in a script found nowhere else on Earth. Its vellum pages are filled with flowing, elegant characters arranged in a pattern that looks like language, yet follows no known grammatical rules. But the text is only half the mystery. The pages bloom with illustrations of plants that have never grown on this planet, their roots and leaves twisting into impossible, fantastical shapes. There are diagrams of celestial spheres with unfamiliar constellations, and intricate drawings of tiny, nude female figures bathing in or connected by a system of what appear to be pipes and vessels, suggesting a strange biological cosmology. This artifact was discovered in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich, who found it in a chest at a Jesuit college in Italy. Radiocarbon dating has since confirmed the vellum was created in the early 15th century, placing it firmly in the late medieval period. Yet its content seems utterly alien to that time. For decades, intelligence agencies like the United States National Security Agency and brilliant minds like World War II codebreakers have applied every modern analytical technique to crack its code. They have searched for patterns, statistical fingerprints, any clue that would reveal it to be a cipher, a lost language, or a constructed script. So far, every attempt has ended in frustration. The manuscript yields nothing but more questions. The central enigma is one of purpose. If it is a hoax, it is a work of staggering, obsessive dedication. Creating over 200 pages of consistent, complex nonsense script and hundreds of detailed, unique illustrations would have been a monumental task for a medieval forger with no clear audience or profit motive. The more compelling and unsettling theory is that it is genuine. Perhaps it represents the sole surviving notebook of a forgotten herbalist or alchemist, recording knowledge so esoteric it was encoded to protect it. The unidentifiable plants could be stylized representations of real herbs, their true forms lost to us, or they could be symbolic diagrams of chemical processes or spiritual concepts. The strange biological sections might depict a now lost understanding of human physiology or a metaphorical map of spiritual energies. This manuscript challenges our historical timeline not with gears or metal, but with pure, undiluted intellectual mystery. It represents a pocket of sophisticated thought, a system of knowledge that either existed entirely outside the mainstream of medieval European science or was so carefully hidden that its key has been lost forever. The Voynich Manuscript is a humbling artifact. It stands as a permanent testament to the limits of our understanding. In a world where we believe we can decipher the past, this book sits quietly, reminding us that some doors may remain forever locked, that some conversations from the past were meant to be private, and that history still holds secrets written in languages we have forgotten how to hear. A single coin can carry the weight of an entire voyage. On a coastal site in the state of Maine, archaeologists sifting through the remains of a Penobscot settlement made a discovery no larger than a fingernail. It was a silver coin worn smooth by time, but its markings were still legible. Experts identified it as a Norse penny, a piece of currency minted in Norway between the years 1065 and 1080. This artifact, known as the Maine Penny, presents a deceptively simple question with profound implications. How did a coin from medieval Scandinavia find its way into the soil of a Native American site in New England, centuries before the voyages of Columbus? The immediate and thrilling possibility is direct contact. Norse sagas speak of ventures beyond their established settlement at Elance Oaks Meadows in Newfoundland, describing lands of forests and grapes they called Vinland. Could a Norse explorer, trader, or settler have traveled much further south, reaching the coast of present-day Maine, and in an exchange of goods, left this coin behind? This single artifact would then be physical proof of those saga tales, a tiny, metallic witness to a meeting of two worlds that history barely remembers. It suggests a chapter of exploration more extensive and perhaps more integrated than our textbooks allow. Yet archaeology thrives on caution, and alternative explanations are just as compelling. The coin was found not in a pristine Norse context, but within layers of a long-inhabited Native American site. This opens the possibility of a long and complex journey. Indigenous trade networks span the continent, moving goods over astonishing distances. It is entirely plausible that this coin, perhaps acquired by a Norse group in Newfoundland or Labrador, entered these vast trading circuits. Over generations, passing from hand to hand, community to community, it could have traveled hundreds of miles south, its original meaning fading with each exchange until it became simply a curious piece of shiny metal, a trinket or a talisman, finally coming to rest in Maine. This slower, more diffuse story does not diminish the coin's significance, it merely reshapes it. Instead of proving a specific Norse landing party, it testifies to the incredible reach and connectivity of pre-Columbian America. The Maine Penny, therefore, exists in a beautiful state of ambiguity. It does not offer a definitive answer, but rather holds two parallel histories in balance. On one side, it is a beacon of early transatlantic contact, a hard datum that stretches the timeline of European presence. On the other, it is a testament to the sophisticated indigenous economies that moved objects and ideas across a continent. This small piece of silver challenges us to think in more interconnected ways. It reminds us that history is not just about first contact, but about the countless, often untraceable connections that weave the human story together long before the history books declare an age of discovery has begun. The quiet trade of a Norse coin speaks of connections across water and time. But what happens when the artifact itself is made of a metal that should not exist? In 1974, on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania, workers digging a trench for a construction project uncovered something extraordinary. Buried in a layer of sand and clay, alongside the massive bones of a mastodon, they found a strange, wedge-shaped object. It was heavy for its size, and its surface was pitted and covered in a thick oxide layer. Initially mistaken for a piece of stone or an axe head, it was set aside with the bones and largely forgotten. Years later, a researcher took a closer look. Laboratory analysis revealed its shocking composition. The object was made of a metal that is commonplace in our modern world, but an utter impossibility for its supposed age. It was aluminum. This artifact, known as the Aiud Wedge, presents a paradox forged in metal. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found in a pure, metallic state in nature. It is always locked tightly inside minerals like bauxite. To free it requires the whole Herowold process, a complex method of electrolysis that was not invented until the late 19th century. The very existence of a refined aluminum object in a geological context dated to around 11,000 years ago is, according to conventional history, a chronological impossibility. The wedge was found in a stratum alongside Pleistocene-era mastodon remains, a time when human societies were nomadic hunter-gatherers, working with stone and bone, not smelting advanced alloys. The immediate, breathtaking implication is that someone or something possessed this technology in deep prehistory. This has fueled speculation ranging from a lost advanced human culture, perhaps the legacy of Atlantis, to the more fringe idea of extraterrestrial visitors leaving behind a fragment of their technology. The artifact seems to be a physical rebuke to our linear story of progress, a manufactured item stranded in the wrong epoch. Yet material science and archaeology often engage in a delicate dance of interpretation. Skeptics offer a more grounded, if less sensational, explanation. They propose the wedge is not prehistoric at all, but a piece of modern machinery, most likely the tooth from a heavy excavator or dredging bucket. Such teeth are commonly made from hardened aluminum alloys and are precisely wedge-shaped to penetrate earth. The theory suggests that during earlier, unrecorded excavations or dredging in the riverbank, this piece broke off and was driven deep into the sediment, eventually settling near the ancient mastodon bones through natural disturbance or the very construction work that uncovered it. The thick oxide layer could have formed in a matter of decades in the wet, mineral-rich environment, so the Aiud Wedge forces a fundamental question of trust. When the story told by the material of an object clashes with the story told by the ground it was found in, which narrative do we follow? Do we allow the sensational possibility of the artifact to rewrite our understanding of ancient metallurgy? Or do we critically re-examine the archaeological context, acknowledging that stratigraphy can be disrupted and that objects can migrate between layers over time? This small, heavy wedge is a weight on the scale of historical interpretation. It does not provide easy answers, but instead highlights the rigorous, often contentious process of distinguishing a world-changing anomaly from a simple case of mistaken context. It reminds us that every discovery exists within two frameworks, the physical object and the story of its finding, and sometimes the greatest mystery lies in reconciling the two. Material science presents puzzles of composition, but geometry carved in stone poses a different kind of silent challenge. Deep in the tropical landscape of Costa Rica's Diquis Delta, hundreds of massive stone spheres lie scattered, as if a giant's game of marbles was abandoned mid-play. Ranging from the size of a melon to colossal orbs over 2 meters in diameter and weighing many tons, these spheres were crafted by pre-Columbian peoples between the years 300 and 1500 of the Common Era. Their surfaces are often remarkably smooth, their shapes approaching a near-perfect sphericity that seems to defy the simple stone tools with which they were made. This geometric precision is the core of their mystery. How did these cultures, without the wheel, without metal implements, achieve such consistent perfection on such a monumental scale? The process itself remains a subject of awe. Archaeologists believe the spheres were shaped from large boulders of granodiorite, a hard volcanic stone. Craftsmen likely used a combination of controlled heating with fire and rapid cooling with water to fracture the rock along natural fault lines, then painstakingly pecked and ground the surfaces with other stones over what must have been generations of patient labor. The final smoothing, achieving that breathtaking curve, would have required an intuitive mastery of geometry and an artist's eye for form, all guided by hands and simple tools. Their purpose is just as enigmatic as their creation. Some researchers propose they were astronomical markers, aligned to celestial events or the solstices, turning the landscape into a giant observatory. Others see them as symbols of power and status, placed near the homes of chiefs to denote authority, or as territorial boundary markers for different clans. There is also a compelling theory that their arrangement held deep cosmological meaning, representing celestial bodies or mapping a spiritual understanding of the universe. Whatever their intended function, the spheres stand as a profound testament to human dedication. They challenge a narrow, technology-centric view of progress. We often equate advancement with the invention of metal or the wheel, but these artifacts demonstrate that a society can achieve staggering precision and undertake monumental projects through sheer collective will, sophisticated knowledge passed through generations, and an intimate relationship with their materials. The spheres are not out of place in time, but they are out of step with our assumptions. They force us to expand our definition of what an ancient culture was capable of, reminding us that technological simplicity does not preclude intellectual or artistic complexity. They are a silent lesson in patience, a monument not to conquest, but to the slow, beautiful work of making the world reflect an ideal shape held in the mind's eye. A perfect sphere speaks of geometry and patience, but a carved stone can tell a far more urgent and personal story. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant named Olof Oman was clearing trees on his farm near the small town of Kensington, Minnesota. His axe struck something hard, and as he dug around the roots of a poplar tree, he uncovered a large, flat slab of greywacke stone. When he turned it over, he found its surface covered in strange, angular markings. The stone, weighing over 200 pounds, was soon identified as bearing a runic inscription, a message carved in the alphabet of medieval Scandinavia. The text, once translated, told a harrowing tale. It claimed to be a record left by a party of 8 Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland. Dated to the year 1362, it described a tragic event. The inscription reads in part that 10 men were red with blood and dead, and that the group was camped by a lake with 2 skerries, a day's journey north from this stone. This was not a record of a coastal landing, but of a deep, inland expedition into the very heart of North America, over a century before Columbus and a full 130 years after the last known Norse voyages to Newfoundland. The Kensington Runestone ignited a firestorm that still burns today. For mainstream linguists and historians, the verdict was swift. The rune forms used were deemed anachronistic, a mix of styles from different periods that no genuine 14th century carver would have used. The language itself contained modern Swedish elements. The story of its discovery by a poor immigrant farmer who just happened to be of Scandinavian descent seemed too convenient. The academic consensus labeled it a clever, patriotic hoax, a creation of the 19th century meant to carve a Norse heritage directly into the American heartland. Yet the stone has stubbornly refused to be dismissed. Proponents for its authenticity point to more subtle evidence. They argue that the weathering of the inscription grooves appears deep and ancient, consistent with centuries of exposure, not a few years. They highlight linguistic nuances that could suggest a genuine medieval dialect, and they point to the specific geography mentioned, which some argue matches the local lakes and islands of Minnesota surprisingly well. The stone has become a powerful symbol far beyond its physical weight. It embodies the profound human desire to find a tangible connection to a deeper, more epic past. For many in the Scandinavian American community, it represents a validation of their heritage, a proof that their ancestors walked this land long before others. It sits at the very center of a conflict between established academic authority, built on decades of peer-reviewed evidence, and a powerful grassroots revisionism driven by local pride and a longing for a more dramatic historical narrative. The Kensington Runestone challenges the official timeline not with gears or metal, but with a story. Its true power lies in the questions it forces us to ask about history itself. Who gets to write it? What evidence do we trust when an artifact speaks a story we so deeply wish to hear? This heavy slab of greywacke is a monument to the idea that history is not just a collection of facts, but a living conversation, often contested, between the past we uncover and the past we need to believe in. The weight of a runestone anchors us in a story of human longing, but a carving on a temple wall illuminates a different kind of vision. Within the ancient temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, a series of intricate reliefs have sparked one of the most visually compelling debates in alternative history. In a secluded crypt, stone carvings show a strange and specific scene. A large, elongated object reminiscent of a modern glass bulb is held aloft by a pillar. Inside this bulb, a serpent stretches along its length. This snake is connected by a cable to a box, upon which a kneeling figure rests their hands, while a baboon-like being holds two knives pointed toward the serpent. To the modern eye, the interpretation seems almost self-evident. The bulb is a lamp, the serpent is the glowing filament, the cable is an electrical wire, the box is a power source or battery, and the pillar is an insulator. The entire assembly looks like a schematic for an ancient electric light, a technology that should be millennia away from the artisans who carved it. This is the so-called Dendera Light, and its imagery is undeniably powerful. Egyptologists, however, translate this scene through a very different lens, one of mythology and symbolism. They identify the central figure not as a light bulb, but as a lotus flower, a potent symbol of creation in Egyptian belief. The serpent is the god Harsomptus, representing the life force and the dawn, emerging from the lotus. The box is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the kneeling figure is Her, the god of infinity. The baboon is likely the god Thoth, and the knives are warding off chaos. In this reading, the entire tableau is a complex cosmological diagram, illustrating the moment of creation itself, where the sun god is born from the primordial waters, depicted by the serpent emerging from the lotus. It is a spiritual and philosophical statement, not an electrical blueprint. This artifact presents a perfect case study in the psychology of discovery. It highlights how the lens through which we view the past is inevitably colored by the technology of our present. We live in a world illuminated by glass bulbs and humming with electricity, so when we see a serpent in an elongated container connected to a box, our brains immediately make that connection. The alternative theory asks a provocative question: are we projecting our own world onto the symbols of the ancients, or are we glimpsing a literal truth, a fragment of a lost technology that was expressed through the only symbolic language the artists had? Could the temple relief be both a spiritual metaphor that also encodes a practical understanding of a phenomenon like electric discharge, perhaps observed in nature and harnessed in some form for temple rituals? The Dendera Light does not offer proof, but it brilliantly illuminates the tension between two ways of knowing. It asks us to consider whether ancient knowledge was strictly symbolic, or if their symbols were sometimes the direct language they used to describe very real and very advanced understandings of their world. The symbols of the temple are carved for human eyes, but a message meant for the sky requires a canvas of impossible scale. Stretching across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines transform 500 square kilometers of desert into the world's most enigmatic art gallery. Created by the Nazca culture over a 1,000-year period beginning around 500 years before the Common Era, these are not mere drawings. They are geoglyphs, vast designs made by removing the dark, sun-baked surface pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath. From the ground, they appear as shallow, meandering paths, their logic and beauty completely obscured, but ascend to the sky and the desert floor transforms. A hummingbird with wings outstretched over 100 meters emerges, a spider with precise, segmented legs, a monkey with a spiraling tail. Alongside these biomorphic figures are miles of straight lines, trapezoids, and complex geometric shapes, some running parallel for kilometers without deviation. This is the central, breathtaking paradox of Nazca. The full majesty and intent of these creations are only visible from a vantage point high above the earth, a perspective the Nazca people themselves are not believed to have possessed. The practical question of their construction is a marvel of organization and simple technology. Using stakes and ropes, the Nazca could have plotted these enormous designs with remarkable precision, a testament to their communal effort and understanding of geometry. They did not need airplanes to build their lines, only patience and a shared vision. But the question of purpose leads us into far deeper mystery. Why create art you can never see? Mainstream archaeology offers several compelling theories rooted in the culture's worldview. The lines may have been ritual pathways, walked during ceremonies to invoke life-giving water from the parched landscape. They could be astronomical calendars, aligned with solstices or celestial bodies, turning the entire pampa into a giant observatory connected to cycles of agriculture and time. Perhaps they were offerings to deities believed to dwell in the sky, massive signs meant to be seen from above by powerful, spiritual beings. This last idea touches on the artifact's most provocative challenge to the timeline. The lines imply a necessity for an aerial viewer. This has fueled speculation that the Nazca did, in fact, find a way to look down upon their work. Could they have developed primitive hot air balloon technology, using woven fabrics and the heat from fires to achieve short, tethered flights? While no direct evidence exists, it is a tantalizing engineering possibility. The other, more cosmic interpretation is that the viewer was not human at all. This has made the Nazca Lines a cornerstone for theories of ancient contact, the idea that these immense markings were landing signals or messages for visitors from other worlds. Yet to reduce them to either a runway or a ritual is to perhaps miss their profound cultural power. The Nazca Lines stand as the ultimate expression of faith in the unseen. They represent a civilization investing generations of labor into a dialogue with the heavens, crafting a legacy not for themselves but for the gods, the cosmos, or the future. They challenge our modern, utilitarian mindset by demonstrating that the greatest human endeavors are not always for immediate, practical benefit. Sometimes they are acts of profound communication with forces beyond our understanding, written not on parchment, but on the very skin of the earth, a message in a language of shape and scale that we are still learning how to read. Even the most compelling mystery can have an origin far simpler than we imagine. Deep within a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria, in 1885, miners splitting a block of tertiary-era coal uncovered a strange inclusion. It was a small, heavy object, roughly cube-shaped, though its edges were somewhat rounded. Its surface was smooth and dark, with a distinct groove running around its center. This was the Wolfsegg Iron, sometimes called the Salzburg Cube. The context of its discovery was what made it extraordinary. The coal seam from which it came was reliably dated to the Tertiary period, a geological epoch spanning from around 66 million to 2.6 million years ago. This placed the object deep in a time when, according to all conventional knowledge, the only intelligent life on Earth was in the form of early primates, creatures utterly incapable of metallurgy. The immediate interpretation was sensational. Here was a manufactured metal cube found in a stratum millions of years old. Its symmetrical shape and that peculiar groove seemed to scream of artificial design, a tool or component from an impossibly ancient, non-human civilization. It became a flagship artifact for theories of lost worlds or visitors from beyond our planet, a metallic anachronism that appeared to shatter the timeline. Yet science often provides a more gradual, though no less fascinating, explanation. When the object was subjected to rigorous laboratory analysis, a different story emerged. Detailed examination revealed its composition was not pure, forged iron, but a type of iron that commonly forms in nature. It was identified as either a rare type of iron meteorite, a fragment from a long-ago asteroid impact, or more likely, a geological concretion. Concretions are hard, compact masses that form when mineral cement precipitates and solidifies around a nucleus within sedimentary rock. They can take on remarkably geometric shapes, including cubes and spheres, as the crystallization process follows natural laws of chemistry and physics. The distinctive groove around its middle could have been formed by the shifting pressures of the surrounding coal over eons, or by the way the concretion separated from its matrix. The Wolfsegg Iron stands as a crucial lesson in the discipline of discovery. It embodies the essential tension between our pattern-seeking minds and the patient work of verification. Our brains are wired to see design, to find the signal in the noise. A cube with a groove looks like something made for a purpose, so we instinctively assign it one. This artifact teaches us that nature itself is a master craftsman, capable of producing forms that mimic human work with uncanny accuracy. It does not diminish the sense of wonder, but redirects it. Instead of pointing to a forgotten factory in the age of dinosaurs, it points to the slow, alchemical artistry of geological time, where heat, pressure, and chemistry collaborate to create natural sculptures. This small cube tempers our excitement with a necessary dose of methodological caution. It reminds us that before an artifact can rewrite history, it must first survive the rigorous scrutiny of science, a process designed not to stifle imagination, but to ensure that the stories we tell about our past are built on the most solid ground possible. Buried with reverence in the valley of Toluca, a small face stares back from a world away. Unearthed in 1933 from a burial at the Calixtlahuaca site in Mexico, this terracotta artifact is known as the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head. It is a humble object, but its features are a shock to the historical narrative. The figure bears the clear, classical style of ancient Rome, with a neatly trimmed beard and a hairstyle known as a Roman fringe, a fashion common in the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era. Yet this head was not found in the ruins of Italy or Greece. It was discovered in a sealed archaeological layer associated with the Matlatzinca culture, a context reliably dated to the late 15th century. decades before the arrival of Spanish conquistadors. The stylistic mismatch is profound. Mesoamerican art of this period is characterized by its own majestic, often symbolic forms, from the stoic gods of the Aztecs to the intricate Maya carvings. This head, with its naturalistic, individualistic Roman portrait style, is an alien aesthetic in this soil. The immediate and thrilling question it raises is one of transoceanic contact. Could a Roman vessel, perhaps blown wildly off course in a storm, have made the perilous journey across the Atlantic, its sole surviving relic eventually traded or cherished as a curiosity, finding its way into this burial over 1,000 years later? The idea directly confronts the long-held isolationist model of New World history, which posits that the Americas developed in complete separation from the Old World after the initial peopling of the continents. This artifact whispers a different possibility, that the oceans were not absolute barriers, but highways occasionally traveled by the lost, the lucky, or the determined, leading to fleeting, forgotten exchanges. Skeptics, however, urge a more cautious interpretation. They point to the possibility of post-colonial intrusion, suggesting the head could have been dropped or placed into the site by later activity after the Spanish arrival, though the sealed burial context makes this difficult. The more serious challenge is the potential for a modern forgery planted to create a sensation. Yet, thermoluminescence dating, a scientific test that measures the last time the terracotta was fired, has been performed on the head multiple times. The results consistently point to an age of around 2,000 years, aligning it with the Roman era, not the 15th century. This scientific data deepens the mystery rather than solving it. If genuine, the head does not imply a Roman colony in Mexico, but something far more subtle and intriguing, a single thread of connection. It suggests that objects, and perhaps the ideas and stories that traveled with them, could move across vast distances through chains of trade or the caprice of fate. A Roman merchant's personal figurine, lost in a shipwreck, might wash ashore to be found by local people who valued it for its strangeness and beauty, passing it down until it was laid to rest with honor. This artifact challenges us to expand our sense of the ancient world's interconnectedness. It asks us to consider history not as a series of isolated bubbles, but as a tapestry where even the most fragile, solitary threads can hint at a pattern of contact we are only beginning to trace. Gold, in the hands of ancient artists, was a medium for capturing the divine, the animal, and the human form. Yet in the highlands of Colombia, the Quimbaya culture produced a collection of small gold figurines that seem to capture something else entirely, a shape that feels startlingly familiar to the modern eye. Crafted around 1,000 years ago, these artifacts are officially described as stylized insects, birds, or other zoomorphic figures, common subjects for ritual offerings. But a subset of these objects defies easy classification. They possess sleek, streamlined bodies that resemble fuselages, distinct delta-shaped wings set at precise angles, and what look like vertical and horizontal tail stabilizers. To anyone who has seen a modern jet fighter or a space shuttle, the resemblance is uncanny, even unsettling. These forms appear less like the fluttering wings of a beetle and more like the calculated geometry of aeronautical engineering. This visual paradox launched an extraordinary experiment. Intrigued by the design, enthusiasts created precise scale models of these gold objects and placed them in wind tunnels. The results were not merely artistic, they were functional. The replicas demonstrated remarkable aerodynamic stability, generating lift and maintaining a smooth flight path without the need for computerized adjustments. This finding does not prove the Quimbaya had aircraft, but it ignites a profound line of questioning about the origins of form. Did these artisans, through generations of observing birds, insects, and seeds spiraling on the wind, unconsciously distill the principles of flight into an abstract shape? Could an intuitive understanding of what cuts smoothly through the air have guided their hands, leading them to a form that our own science later arrived at through calculation and trial. The Quimbaya artifacts live in the beautiful, ambiguous space between art and potential function. They challenge the rigid categories we impose on the past, where an object must be either a ritual symbol or a practical tool. Perhaps for them it was both. The act of shaping gold into a form that moved with the grace of a bird in flight may have been a spiritual act in itself, a way of capturing the essence of a sacred creature's power. These small, luminous objects push us to reconsider the very nature of observation and innovation. They suggest that the human mind, when deeply connected to the natural world, can arrive at elegant solutions that resonate across millennia, their true significance only becoming clear when later generations developed the language to understand what was all along a masterpiece of intuitive design. The mystery of an image can be as profound as the mystery of a machine. Few artifacts in human history have been subjected to more intense scientific scrutiny or inspired more fervent debate than the Shroud of Turin. This length of linen, measuring over 14 feet long, bears the faint, haunting image of a man who appears to have suffered the injuries of crucifixion. For centuries, it has been venerated by many as the actual burial cloth of Jesus, a sacred relic of immense spiritual power. Its very existence poses a question that straddles faith, science, and art, challenging our understanding of what was possible in the distant past. The image on the cloth is not painted. It is a subtle, straw-colored discoloration of the linen fibers themselves, existing only on the very surface. It possesses a startling three-dimensional quality, as if it encodes information about the distance between the cloth and the body it covered. The wounds visible on the image, from the scourge marks on the back to the puncture in the wrist, align with historical accounts of Roman crucifixion practices with unsettling precision. For a long time, the debate seemed settled by a definitive scientific verdict. In 1988, radiocarbon dating was performed on a small sample of the shroud by 3 independent laboratories. Their conclusion placed the linen's origin between the years 1260 and 1390, firmly within the medieval period. This pointed to a forgery, a masterful creation meant to inspire devotion or perhaps profit in the Middle Ages. Yet the story did not end there. Critics of the carbon dating results pointed to potential contamination. The shroud survived a severe fire in 1532, which could have introduced carbon from smoke and water used to extinguish the flames, potentially skewing the test toward a younger age. Furthermore, the nature of the image itself presents scientific puzzles that a simple medieval forgery struggles to explain. How did an artist create a perfect negative image centuries before the invention of photography? The shroud's image behaves like a photographic negative, revealing a positive, highly detailed portrait only when viewed as such. The coloration is not caused by any known pigment, dye, or stain. Some researchers have proposed extraordinary theories to account for it, including a primitive form of photography using a camera obscura and silver compounds, or a burst of radiant energy, perhaps from a momentary, intense event that altered the fibers. The shroud, therefore, challenges the timeline not of gears or metallurgy, but of forensic and artistic capability. Could a medieval artisan, no matter how skilled, have possessed the knowledge of human anatomy, the understanding of light and chemistry, and the artistic genius to produce an image that continues to defy easy replication even with modern technology? Or does the cloth point to a phenomenon outside our conventional historical framework, an event that left a physical trace science can detect but not yet fully explain? It exists in a space beyond proof or disproof, a tangible object that asks us to consider the limits of both our historical models and our scientific methods when confronted with an artifact of profound and enduring mystery. A shroud preserves the faint echo of a human form, But in the depths of the earth, spheres of metal hold a secret from a time before humanity, before animals, before life itself. In the mineral-rich mines of South Africa, workers have extracted hundreds of peculiar objects from a layer of rock known as the Precambrian pyrophyllite deposits. These are the grooved spheres, sometimes called the Klerksdorp spheres. They are small, rarely more than an inch or two across, and composed of a bluish metallic material, often pyrite or fool's gold. At first glance, they seem almost perfectly round, but their most arresting feature is a set of fine, parallel grooves or ridges that encircle their equator, as if machined by a precise lathe. The rock layer that cradles them is not merely old, it is ancient beyond human comprehension, dated to around 2.8 billion years. At that distant moment in our planet's story, the only life was microscopic, simple cells drifting in primordial seas. The land was barren, the atmosphere hostile. The idea of a tool making intelligence was a fantasy separated by billions of years of evolutionary time. So what are these grooved spheres? To the geologist, they are a textbook example of a natural concretion, a fascinating but explainable quirk of geology. Pyrite can crystallize in spherical forms called pyrite concretions. As they form under immense pressure and heat, layers of sediment and mineral can create concentric bands. The grooves could be the result of crystal growth patterns, or later geological stresses that etched lines into the sphere's surface as the surrounding rock shifted and metamorphosed over eons. Nature, acting with the patient force of deep time, is a master sculptor of symmetrical forms, from perfect snowflakes to hexagonal basalt columns. Yet, the human mind is wired to see design, and these objects look designed. Their symmetry and those precise, parallel grooves feel intentional, like the grip on a metal ball bearing or a component from some unthinkably ancient machinery. This visual paradox places them at the heart of a profound challenge, not about ancient civilizations, but about the very limits of our perception. They force us to confront the sheer, staggering scale of geological time, a span so vast that within it, the slow, blind processes of chemistry and physics can produce shapes that mimic the work of intelligent hands with uncanny accuracy. The spheres do not necessarily rewrite history, but they brilliantly illuminate the tension between what we see and what we know. They ask us to hold two truths at once, to marvel at the natural wonder of a self-organizing universe capable of creating such seemingly perfect forms, while also acknowledging the powerful, almost irresistible urge to find a maker behind the mystery. In their silent, metallic presence, they offer a humbling lesson that the greatest anomaly may sometimes be our own compulsion to see a message in the stone, a signal in the silence of the deep earth, where only the slow artistry of time has been at work. The slow artistry of geology can mimic design, but what if the design itself is a deliberate illustration of life's most intimate secrets? In the private collection of Professor Jaime Gutierrez in Bogotá, Colombia, rests an artifact of profound and unsettling clarity. Known as the genetic disc, it is a circular slab of lyddite, a hard, black stone roughly the size of a dinner plate. Its surface is not marked by random grooves, but by a series of intricate, precise carvings that seem to tell a specific story. A story written in a language of symbols we recognize from modern biology. The disc is estimated to be over 6,000 years old, a relic from a pre-Columbian culture whose name we may never know, yet the images etched upon it feel hauntingly familiar. They appear to depict with startling accuracy the very processes that create human life. One section shows a sperm cell approaching an ovum, their forms distinct. Another sequence illustrates the stages of fetal development, from a simple cluster of cells to a recognizable human embryo curled within what could be a womb. Other carvings detail various cell types, some with visible nuclei, resembling the diagrams found in a contemporary biology textbook. This visual narrative presents an intellectual paradox of staggering scale. The formal, microscopic understanding of human reproduction and cellular biology is an achievement of the last few centuries, dependent entirely on the invention of powerful lenses. The idea that a Stone Age culture could possess such a literal, detailed knowledge of processes invisible to the naked eye seems, on its face, an impossibility. It suggests a leap of understanding that bypasses the very tools we believe are necessary for that understanding. Mainstream archaeology approaches the disk with a different interpretive lens. Scholars often attribute such perceptions to pareidolia, our brain's powerful tendency to find meaningful patterns, especially familiar ones, in ambiguous stimuli. They argue that the carvings are stylized symbols, perhaps representing cosmological concepts, clan totems, or spiritual beliefs about creation and ancestry. A spiral might represent the cycle of life, not a sperm cell. A circle with dots could be a constellation, not a fertilized egg. In this view, the parallel to modern biology is a compelling coincidence, a case of our contemporary knowledge being projected onto the ancient artist's symbolic language. Yet, the specificity of the imagery gives one pause. The progression, the pairing of distinct forms, the very layout that suggests a sequence from conception to early development, these elements feel too organized, too narrative, to be easily dismissed as abstract pattern. This artifact lives in the delicate space between ancient intuition and modern science. It raises a possibility more subtle than a lost civilization with microscopes. Could a deep, observational wisdom, accumulated over generations and expressed through sacred art, have intuitively grasped the principles of life's origin? Might careful observation of miscarriages, of the cycles of plants and animals, have led to a symbolic representation that accidentally, or perhaps insightfully, mapped the actual biological process? The genetic disk does not offer proof of ancient laboratories, but it presents a powerful visual code. It is as if the artists carved their understanding of a profound mystery, and millennia later, we have finally developed the dictionary to begin translating their symbols. It challenges the linear narrative of scientific progress, suggesting that truth can be approached from different directions through ritual, symbol, and deep contemplation, as well as through lens and experiment. This black stone circle asks us to consider whether the deepest truths of our existence are not discovered, but remembered, encoded in art across the ages, waiting for the moment when our eyes are finally able to see what their hands so carefully carved. A profound mystery lies not in a tool or a temple, but in a simple bowl, on the sun-drenched Altiplano of Bolivia, near the shores of the immense Lake Titicaca. A farmer made an unassuming discovery. It was a large, heavy stone vessel carved from a single block. This artifact, known as the Fuente Magna bowl, would become a focal point for one of the most radical ideas in alternative history. The bowl itself is striking, with zoomorphic handles and carvings of local animals like frogs and snakes, motifs deeply rooted in Andean symbolism. Yet, covering its interior surface is a script that seems to belong to another world entirely. To some researchers, the intricate markings bear a startling resemblance to Proto-Sumerian cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing system that emerged in ancient Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. If this interpretation is correct, the implications are seismic. It would place an object inscribed with Old World writing in the heart of South America, around 3,000 years before the Common Era, a time when, according to conventional history, these two hemispheres were completely isolated from one another. This artifact does not merely suggest a lost voyage, it proposes a direct and sustained cultural bridge, a sharing of language and belief across oceans millennia before such a feat was thought possible. It challenges the very foundation of how we understand the spread of ideas and people in the ancient world, painting a picture of a globe far more connected in deep antiquity than our textbooks allow. The academic response to this claim has been one of profound skepticism. Mainstream archaeologists and linguists point to the absence of any corroborating evidence. No other Sumerian artifacts have been found in the Americas. The script on the bowl, while visually suggestive, has not been conclusively deciphered by any expert in ancient Mesopotamian languages, and its symbols could be a form of local proto-writing or even elaborate decorative patterns. The most damning criticism is the possibility of a modern origin, that the bowl is a genuine pre-Columbian vessel onto which someone, perhaps in the 20th century, carved markings to create a sensational forgery. Without a documented professional excavation context, the bowl's provenance remains shadowed in doubt. Yet the Fuente Magna bowl persists as a powerful symbol. It embodies the ultimate frontier of historical revisionism, the hypothesis of direct transoceanic contact in an impossibly distant past. Its true power lies not in proving a Sumerian colony in Bolivia, but in framing a fundamental question about human ambition. Is the idea of ancient sailors crossing vast oceans truly an impossibility, or is it simply an idea that our current model of history cannot comfortably accommodate? The bowl sits at the crossroads of two narratives, one of a wondrously interconnected ancient world, and another of isolated civilizations developing in parallel. It asks us to consider which story feels more complete, and to acknowledge that sometimes the most challenging artifacts are those that force us to reimagine the map of human possibility itself, not through gears or geometry, but through the quiet, enduring power of a written mark. The search for our origins can lead us to look not just into the soil, but toward the stars themselves. Among the most profound claims in the study of ancient mysteries involves not an artifact made by human hands, but a stone that fell from the sky. Reports have emerged of meteorites recovered in Sri Lanka that contain something astonishing: tiny structures that, under a microscope, bear a striking resemblance to fossilized algae. These are not carvings or inscriptions, but potential biological signatures encased in a rock from deep space. The implication is as grand as it gets. It suggests that simple life may not be unique to our planet, and that the seeds of biology could have been transported across the cosmos, riding on asteroids to take root on a young Earth. This idea, known as panspermia, proposes that life's story is not a local tale but a galactic epic, and these meteorites could be its first physical pages. The excitement surrounding such a find is palpable, for it would challenge not merely the timeline of human civilization, but the fundamental narrative of life's solitary beginning on our world. It shifts the question from how life emerged here to whether it has always been a traveler in the vast dark between stars. Yet this is where the rigorous discipline of science engages in its most critical work. Mainstream researchers approach these claims with deep caution. They point to alternative explanations that are far more likely, though no less fascinating in their own right. The delicate, filament-like structures could be the result of terrestrial contamination, where modern algae or fungi have infiltrated the meteorite after its fall. More commonly, they are attributed to purely abiotic processes, intricate mineral formations that naturally mimic biological shapes through crystalline growth. The universe, it seems, is a master of mimicry, capable of creating non-living forms that trick our pattern-seeking minds into seeing life where there is only geology. This potential artifact exists in a beautiful, frustrating limbo. It brilliantly illustrates the tension at the very edge of discovery, where a revolutionary possibility meets the painstaking burden of proof. It reminds us that the most extraordinary ideas demand evidence that is not only extraordinary, but impeccably clear, repeatedly verified, and open to the most severe scrutiny. The Sri Lanka meteorites, whether they carry fossils or not, perform an essential service. They push us to refine our tools and our thinking, to look more carefully, and to understand that the history of life may be written in a language we are only beginning to decipher. inscribed not on parchment or stone, but in the very fabric of stones that were never from our world at all. The line between human and animal has always been a fertile ground for myth, but some ancient figures seem to blur it in a uniquely unsettling way. In the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, from a time known as the Ubaid period, roughly 5,500 to 4,000 years before the Common Era, archaeologists have unearthed a collection of small terracotta figurines. They are humble objects shaped by hands in a world that had just begun to master agriculture and settle into villages. Their bodies are humanoid, often shown in postures of daily life, cradling infants, or engaged in what appear to be ritual poses. But their heads are something else entirely. They are elongated with pronounced slanted eyes and features that read not as human, but as distinctly reptilian or lizard-like. These are the Ubaid Lizardmen, and they present a quiet, persistent puzzle in the dawn of human symbolism. To the archaeologist working within the framework of cultural context, the interpretation is clear and grounded. These are stylized human forms, likely representing deities, ancestors, or spiritual concepts. The Ubaid culture had no written language, so their beliefs are expressed solely through objects like these. The reptilian features could symbolize wisdom, fertility, or a connection to the life-giving waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, where lizards were a common sight. The nurturing poses, especially the figures holding babies, strongly suggest they were associated with protection, childbirth, or the continuity of the community. They are artifacts of a belief system, not portraits of literal beings. Yet the visual impact of these figurines is undeniable and transcends their original context. To the modern viewer, they bear an eerie, almost prophetic resemblance to contemporary depictions of reptilian beings in popular culture and certain speculative theories. This resemblance has fueled a very different line of thought, one that asks whether these objects could be rooted in something more than metaphor. Could they represent a cultural memory of a non-human intelligence, a forgotten encounter that was preserved in clay for millennia? This idea pushes against the boundaries of conventional history, suggesting a narrative far outside the standard timeline of human development. The true power of the Ubaid figurines, however, may lie in a deeper, more psychological space. They challenge us to understand the origins of the monstrous and the divine in the human imagination. Why, at the very cradle of civilization, did the artistic impulse so frequently merge the human form with that of the reptile? Reptiles are ancient, primal, and profoundly other. They represent a lineage of life far older than our own. By fusing their features with the human form, these early artists may have been attempting to express a connection to the primordial forces of nature, to tap into an ancient power, or to give form to the unseen guardians of their world. These artifacts do not demand we believe in ancient lizard people, but they do insist we take the human capacity for symbolic thought seriously. They are a window into a mindset where the boundaries between species, between the natural and the supernatural, were fluid and rich with meaning. They remind us that the first stories humans ever told were not written in words, but shaped in clay, and some of those stories featured faces that still, after 7,000 years, have the power to intrigue and unsettle us, asking what deep, shared threads of imagination connect their world to ours. The human desire to connect with a mystical past can sometimes be stronger than the stone itself. Our journey concludes with objects that are perhaps the most famous out-of-place artifacts of all, yet they may be the most revealing about ourselves. The crystal skulls, most notably the Mitchell-Hedges skull discovered in the 1920s, are masterpieces of carved quartz, their surfaces polished to a flawless, eerie translucence. For decades, they were presented as pre-Columbian relics, artifacts of a lost Mesoamerican civilization possessing impossible craftsmanship and rumored psychic properties. Their perfection seemed to defy the simple tools of the ancient world, suggesting a technology or perhaps a knowledge that we could not explain. They became icons of the mysterious, starring in legends of Atlantis, channels of ancient wisdom, and tales of a global network of sacred objects. They challenged not just a timeline, but the very limits of what we believed ancient artisans could achieve. The romance of this narrative is powerful, a story where artistry and mysticism merge into a single, gleaming object. Yet, when these skulls were finally subjected to the scrutiny of modern science, a different story was etched in microscopic detail. Under high-powered microscopes, researchers found telltale marks on the crystal. The patterns of these minute grooves and scratches were not consistent with hand tools like chisels or abrasives used in antiquity. Instead, they perfectly matched the signature of rotary wheels, tools powered by modern machinery that did not exist before the 19th century. The evidence was clear. These were not ancient artifacts, but likely beautiful creations of a much more recent era, perhaps the work of skilled European lapidaries. This revelation could be seen as an ending, a debunking that closes the book on a fascinating mystery, but in truth, it opens a far more profound chapter. The crystal skulls stand as a final meta-artifact. They challenge not the official timeline of history, but the timeline of authenticity itself. They demonstrate how a compelling narrative, once attached to an object, can take on a life entirely its own, becoming a modern myth that is often more resilient and meaningful than the historical facts. Their power was never in their origin, but in the ideas they inspired, the questions they made us ask about our past, and the longing for connection they represented. They remind us that the search for truth is a twofold journey. We must question the provenance of an object, the story of its finding, as fervently as we question its purpose. For every artifact that whispers a secret from the past, we must listen carefully, discerning the voice of the ancient craftsman from the echo of our own hopes. In the end, these 25 objects are not merely a collection of curiosities. They are a conversation. Each one, from the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the disputed grooves of a crystal skull, asks us to re-examine the comfortable story we have been told. They remind us that history is not a sealed book, but a living puzzle, with pieces still missing and others that may have been placed in the wrong section of the board. They encourage a humble curiosity, a willingness to look at the evidence without fear, whether it leads to a revolutionary insight or a simple, grounding truth. The greatest challenge they present is not to our timeline but to our imagination, asking us to hold space for the wondrous, the unexplained, and the patiently logical all at once. These 25 objects, for all their differences, begin to whisper a shared story when we listen to their collective voice. They are not scattered, random anomalies, but tend to gather in distinct clusters around specific, profound human fascinations. Look closely and you will see a pattern emerge, a map of our own deepest curiosities etched across time. A significant number of these artifacts orbit the idea of misunderstood technology. The Antikythera Mechanism, the Baghdad Battery, even the Saqqara Bird, all speak to a haunting question. What if the knowledge to build such things was achieved, cherished, and then utterly lost? They challenge not just a date on a timeline, but the very linear narrative of progress itself, suggesting that advancement can be a cycle of discovery, forgetting, and rediscovery, rather than a simple upward climb. Another powerful cluster revolves around the possibility of contested contact. The Maine Penny, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and the Fuente Magna bowl each represent a fragile thread, a potential connection across vast oceans long before the history books say such journeys were possible. These artifacts do not necessarily prove massive colonization efforts, but they persistently hint at something more subtle and perhaps more beautiful, the idea of occasional, fleeting encounters. A storm-blown ship, a long chain of trade, a single curious object passing from hand to hand across continents. These possibilities paint a picture of an ancient world that may have been whispering to itself across the waters, its conversations now reduced to a coin in the soil or a strange head in a tomb. Then there are the artifacts that mirror our modern world with uncanny clarity. The genetic disc, the Ica Stones, the carvings at Dendera. These objects present images that feel like they were pulled from a textbook or a schematic drawn centuries too soon. This pattern is perhaps the most revealing of all, for it shows us how our own technological age becomes the lens through which we interpret the past. We see a serpent in a bulb and think of electricity. We see a progression of shapes and think of embryology. Our brains are wired to find the familiar, and so we project our own understanding onto the symbols of those who came before, sometimes finding coincidence, and sometimes, perhaps, glimpsing an intuitive grasp of natural principles that their art alone could express. What does this collective pattern ultimately reveal? It tells us less about ancient astronauts or cataclysmic lost civilizations, and far more about the enduring nature of the gaps in our own story. History is written by the survivors, not just of people but of materials. Stone endures where parchment burns. Gold survives where wood rots. Our record is irrevocably fragmentary, a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. These out-of-place artifacts are the pieces that do not seem to fit the picture we have assembled from the fragments we have. And faced with such a gap, the human mind does what it has always done. It tells a story. We fill the silence with narratives that make sense to us, often reflecting the technologies and concerns of our own time. The real mystery, then, may not be in the artifacts themselves, but in our powerful, perpetual need to explain them. Taken together, this collection does not demand we believe in any single extraordinary claim. Instead, it builds a compelling case for a more humble, more wondrous view of the human journey. It suggests our past is not a simple, clean line, but a rich, tangled web of ingenuity, connection, loss, and rediscovery. It is a story that is more complex, more interconnected, and occasionally more inexplicable than any single textbook could ever contain. These objects are not errors in the data. They are invitations to keep looking, to keep questioning, and to hold space for the possibility that the greatest chapters of our shared story might still be waiting quietly to be read. From the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the contested runes of the Kensington Stone, each of these 25 artifacts serves as a beacon, illuminating the shadowy corners of our past. They do not provide easy answers, but they ask profound questions, forcing us to remain humble in the face of history's vast and often silent archive. Whether ultimately explained by forgery, misinterpretation, or genuine anomaly, they enrich our understanding by challenging complacency. Every time we dismiss an artifact too quickly, we risk closing a door. Every time we accept an extraordinary claim too readily, we risk losing our footing. The true value of these objects lies in the space between those two extremes, in the disciplined yet open-minded inquiry they demand. The official timeline is not a prison but a framework, a scaffold built from the best evidence we have. These artifacts are the tools that test its strength, probing for weaknesses, searching for connections we might have missed. They remind us that this framework is not set in stone. It is a living structure constantly being reinforced, repaired, and occasionally redesigned as new pieces are found. This is not a flaw in the study of history. It is its greatest strength. It means our story is alive, responsive, and capable of growing more complete and more wondrous with each new discovery. So keep questioning, keep exploring. Look at the world around you with a curious eye, for history is not just found in distant deserts or deep-sea wrecks. It is in the landscape of your own hometown, in the stories passed down, in the oddities tucked away in local museums. Remember that history is not merely a record of what has been. It is a conversation about what could have been, and it is a story we are still actively writing with every dig, every analysis, and every thoughtful debate. We would love to hear which of these 25 artifacts intrigued you the most, or if you have another favorite mystery that challenges the conventional story. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown corners of our shared past.